Okay, so welcome back to this particular chapter as far as Plsql is concerned. So for this case, we are talking about chapter 4, and this is based on writing executable statements. Now, this means that it's not something new to us because already we've done a little bit of executing or seeing how to execute statements in Plsql. This is just about a continuation on how we can execute, and again, understanding different things that probably we've not covered on the other side. And as we move forward on this, we have like 3 things to capture. Of course, every unit here, every chapter has some objectives. So the objectives here is, number 1, we need to understand how can we identify lexical units in a Plsql block. So we have this particular term, which is actually called lexical units. So we need to identify and understand what are these lexical units, or what do we mean when we talk about lexical units in Plsql. And then, of course, we're going to understand all the built-in SQL functions, like what are some of the built-in SQL functions. When I talk about built-in SQL functions, these are functions, or these are SQL functions in Plsql that normally comes by default whenever you have the Oracle database software. Because remember, for you to have the Plsql, or to use Plsql as a language, you must have the Oracle database software installed within your system. You also need to describe when implicit conversions takes place and when explicit conversions have to be dealt with. Now, there are 2 terms here. We have explicit conversions and we have implicit conversions. If you remember very well, we talked about those 2 terms, the implicit and explicit in SQL. And of course, again, we are going to talk about how can we write nested blocks and qualify these variables, or qualify variables with labels. And of course, yeah. So out of all those, we're going only to summarize like into 3 sections. You see all those things. How can we write executable statements in a Plsql block? Of course, that chapter alone includes the issue of the lexical units and all that. I'm going to show you. We're going to also have like writing nested blocks. That means nested blocks is more like a subquery. That means you have a query inside another query. So when you talk about nested blocks, this means that you have a block inside another block. And then how can we use operators in developing readable code? So first of all, we need to understand lexical units in Plsql block. So when you talk about lexical units, point number 1 is that these are building blocks. Lexical units are building blocks. You can say are building blocks in Plsql. You see, they are building blocks in Plsql block. So no need for me to. Now, yes, as long as we are referring or trying to define lexical units as the building blocks of any Plsql block, probably we are not also able to understand what they have, because we are talking about the building blocks. What are these building blocks in the actual sense? Now, lexical units, again, in definition, you can also say they are a sequence of characters. They are a sequence of characters. Let's say they are, or let me just press enter, so don't worry. They are sequence. They are sequence of characters. Now, this sequence of characters includes letters. You see, it includes letters. It includes numerals. It includes tabs. You see, when you are able to tab, it includes, let's say, spaces. It includes, let's say, returns. And of course, probably the last but not least, you can also have symbols. You see, you can have some symbols. And all this represents what? Lexical units. So don't worry about this error that's being displayed, because whatever thing as I press enter, it's more of executing the whatever thing I've actually typed. But for this case, it's not something typable or something executable. That's what I'm getting. this error. But what I want us to look at is just look at this first line and look at the second line here. So what are these lexical units in the actual sense? So if you want to clear your screen, just use CL space SER, press enter, it clears your screens. Now, we need to talk about the classification. Lexical units, let's say lexical units can be classified into the following. Number one, it can be classified as identifiers. So when you talk about identifiers, this means that if I'm declaring a variable like vname, I have fname, these are referred to as identifiers. So a name of a variable is actually called an identifier. And of course, as we advance, we will also understand something called the constant. So for the variable, this is why we normally use like the v_name, just to tell the system that, or just to identify for us, or give some bit of visibility when it comes to writing a variable compared to when you are having, let's say, a constant. So for constant, because it will act also like a container to hold some values, we can also start that with C. But this name, writing that does not mean that you're supposed to write the way it is, but just to identify, differentiate between the variable and the constant. So we'll talk about the constant when the time comes. Now, number two, as part of lexical unit classification, we also have something called delimiters. So delimiters here, these are some of the basic things we've been doing. For example, you can have a comma, is a delimiter. You can have a plus, is a delimiter. You can have a subtraction symbol, is a delimiter, or an hyphen is a delimiter. These are referred to as delimiters. Number three, as part of lexical classification, we have literals. Now, literals now into bracket. For example, if I have the name John, John is a literal. If I have 423 is a literal. If I have even today's date, you see, all those, for example, true, all the data types, the booleans, the numbers, the integers, all these, the characters, all these are referred to as booleans. Then number four, on this section, we have the comments. So again, in any programming language, we always have the comments. And comments actually help us a lot. So you can have the dash as a comment. You can also have this, the star and then the star that. So in comments, they are very important in programming because it actually helps us to read in between the lines. It actually portrays the issue of having a code visibility, because what happens if you are given if you're to develop a program, an application, and then you end up, let's say you are developing an application for a certain company, and then after 10 years down the line, probably you are not there. You've actually been transferred to a different, or you've actually gotten a greener pasture, and you've left that company with that particular application. Then, of course, what happens is that a new developer is going to be invited or employed into that company, who will also be in a position to administer what? That particular application. So if there is any change, then this change has to happen at the back end, at the code part of the application. So by you putting the comments, it is helpful because it will be easier for this particular person to read in between your code. And that is what is referred to as one of the classifications of lexical units. So we have around 4 classifications: the identifiers, the delimiters, the literals, and the comments. So just to know how to use this. Just to know how to use this. Now, when it comes to identifiers, of course, you know that because these are mainly to capture the three data types, whether it's a character, whether it is a date. And you can just see at this point, if, for example, I want to declare this, declare VF name, this one, of course, is supposed to capture a what? Let's say, for example, voucher 220, and then put that. Let me attach. So I'm just attaching like John. Now, John. Now I have, let's say, Vsal. Vsal. This one, of course, is a number. I can give 10, put colon. You'll also understand why am I putting. So this one can be 2300. Then, of course, we can have V higher. This is a variable. V voucher 220. I can have that. And then I have, let's say today, date 01, March 2022. Or I can just give it the exact date for today, 27th, no, 28, then April 2022. So you can see that by having these identifiers, you're able to store different data types. You're able to store different data types. So for my case here, I'm storing in VF name, I'm storing a character. In vsal, I'm storing an integer or a number. In VIR, I'm storing a date. And you can see that we have a common thing between date and character. Both of them have to be enclosed within a double quotation. So it's only the number that does not require you to put either the single or the double quotation. So you must be able to know about that. So for delimiters, just a matter of expounding. For delimiters means that the symbols, or it represents symbols that have special meaning. You see, for example, the semicolon, which is actually like an example of delimiter, actually helps us a lot in ensuring that we terminate any SQL or any PLSQL statement. So that is a delimiter. And of course, when it comes to other delimiters, you can have the addition symbol, the subtraction symbol, the multiplication symbol, the division symbol, the equal symbol, the at symbol, and the semicolon symbol. And we have so many other symbols out there. So that brings us to probably talk about something else here. And I just want us to probably identify this. Let me see. Okay, let me just, yeah, so CLSCR. Now let me declare this and see what happens. Declare, I want, let's say F name, let's have voucher 220, put full colon. I want to put the double quotation so that we can prove something here. So I want to display a name, like this name is attached to what? Is attached to the variable F name. Then select, yeah, I can say first underscore name into, okay, let me just have, because it's not coming from database, let me just have DBMS underscore output dot put underscore line into bracket F name end. Now here we're getting an error, and now let me do it once more so that you can read in between the lines. Yeah, I'm repeating this time round. I'm using single. Now look at that, and I forgot to put set server output. You see now the results, the outcome, the repercussion of not choosing, of not turning the server, set server output on. So if I repeat it, now you can see that I am getting John. Now let me take you back here. On this part, You see, when I'm associating, when I'm creating a variable directly, of course, in line with its data type, if I want to assign a value to that particular variable, I don't need to, I'm forbidden to use the double quotation. So the only thing I'm allowed to use is actually the single quotation. So that's why you can see that we have the error here, line 2, column 22, identifier John. You see the way John must be declared. And whenever you encounter an error in Oracle database, especially when you're querying some select statements in SQL Plus or via the terminal, whenever you encounter an error, just try as much as possible to identify where the star is. So the star will always give you an int where the error is. The star will always give you an int where the error is. So that was something that I was trying to show you. So you can see here that I have actually replaced the double quotation with a single quotation, and automatically, yes, it is actually like we successfully managed to query. That means there was no error. The only error is for display. And that's why I had to set server output on. So don't forget about that. And here we are getting John, and then PLSQL successfully completed. Now, that is something I want to do that. So you have to ensure that the formatting, formatting by putting the single quotation, formatting by putting the double quotation. Just know where you're supposed to key in. Now, let me show you the comments. Let me show you the comments, and I'll repeat something, the same thing. Declare. Let's say I want to get fname, varchar220. I want to get sal. Let's say varchar, not varchar. This one is number because it's salary. 10, and then begin. And then let's say select first underscore name. This is the column name. Salary from employees, not from, into fname, comma, sal from employees, where employee ID equals to 100. Now, here means that I can decide to key in, a comment. Now, how do I put in a comment? So we have like a single comment. Single comment means that I have to put in that. So I can just say, let's say the above code is to match the actual column. The actual column with its variable name. You see, one column. This is one column. But what happens if I want to go deeply? I need to use the what? I need to use the double. So I'll put that star, / star, and then I'll go down here, variable name, let's say successfully. So it means that now I have multi-line. Multi-line, it means that more than one line. So this is the first line, this is the second line. So for me to ensure that I have a comment for multi-line, I have to key in what? The / star, then star / and then come down here. I can just have like dbms output dot put underscore line into bracket fname. Now this one I can just again put a comment. Let's say output for fname. I can repeat the same thing. This one I can just put sal, and then output for what? For salary, then press enter. So we end. Now this means that if I press enter, Let's see, table view does not exist. Table view does not exist. Oh, I'm sorry, because I have not actually connected to HR. Yeah, I was supposed to connect to that. So let me repeat it again. Now look at that. Another makosa, set server output on. So let me go it once more. So don't forget this, don't make that, but it's always workable. If you forget at first, you can still query it. So now look at that, look at that. So this means that I am able to get Stephen and 24,000. Now it means that whatever thing that is within the comment, whatever thing that has been commented with us, multi-line, this one is a multi-line comment, and this one is a single line comment. So for single line comment, you have to start with the double hyphens. Don't worry about the last part. It's only the multi-line that you're supposed to worry about, the first and opening and closing. So this means that when it comes to comments, it means that they are not, yes, they are part of the code, but they are not going to be part of the execution plan. So they are just there for guidance. They're just there for feasibility. They're just there to help someone read in between the lines as a guide. And that is what we refer to as the comments. So take that. I know that we will be using comments as we move forward. Now, remember we talked about built-in SQL functions. So if you remember that, probably I can take you back. The same SQL functions that we had in SQL are also going to be depicted, or are also going to be somehow visible on PLSQL, if not all. So if I can just take you back as a remembrance on functions. Functions are actually like built-in, and they tend to ease some work, you see. These are just functions that are basically attached to SQL statements, and they are all predefined. Predefined means that they are already there with the system. So it provides, it actually helps users to query or to find information more easily. So most of their functions are single row functions or single row in functions. And once they're single row functions, we can talk about the number functions, the character functions, and the data type conversion functions, if you remember. So if I can just take you back, look at this visually. I want to create like an hierarchy visually. We have function at the top. This function is broken down into two types. We have single row functions and we have group functions. Now, these group functions are also called aggregate functions. They are also called multi-functions. When you come back to single row functions are actually subdivided into two. Again, the single row functions, leave alone now the group functions. So for the single row functions, we had like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. So of course we had like character functions, we had number functions, we had date functions, we had general functions, we had conversion functions. But in this case, I just want us to talk about the group functions here. You see, we have, for example, the average, the AVG, the mean for minimum, the max for maximum, the count for counting, sum, standard dev, and variance. So these are group functions that are also part and parcel of what we have here. So you'll find us using some of these functions, and don't worry, don't wonder why. Just know that we are still pushing or making use of what we learn in SQL, and applying them in Plsql. So we will talk about these functions. We'll talk about number functions, character functions, conversion functions, date functions, if we have that. Now, if you remember the sequences, I know that there was a point we talked about creating database objects, and I taught you how to create a sequence. And creating this sequence can also allow us to use the same sequence in Oracle database. So in Plsql, in that matter. So that means that we had to create a sequence that can auto increment, or that can give us like a value that needs to be shifted from one point to another. And again, so those are things that we're going to talk about. We also have like data type conversions, where we are able to convert data to other data types. And of course, remember, we are talking about the implicit conversions here and explicit conversions. Explicit conversion, it means that the user has to do that particular conversion, or that conversion has to be done by a programmer. The implicit conversion, it means that it has to be done by the system. And some of the functions that can be used to perform that type conversion is, for example, to char, to date, to number, those kinds of conversions. And I think we will talk about this. We'll talk about all this. So if, for example, we need to talk about, let me just introduce one scenario here. Let me introduce one scenario here. I want us to declare. Now, it's not a must that you should use caps or uppercase. It's not a must. Now, I want to have, let's say, let me have like salary. And then for this particular salary, instead of, let me just give it number. And then let me give like 6. And then here, I am going to assign salary. So here I'm going to give like 7,000. Now the second part I'm going to have is probably the salary hike. So let me say added salary. You see, if you want to use two names as a variable name, you can just separate them, join them with an underscore. Now here I'm going to have it as a voucher 220. And look at this. So we have 1,000. Let me have like 2,000. Then I'll have begin. Let me write this statement so that I can explain. Then before that, I think okay. Let me just repeat it again. Sorry for that. Declare. I want to have, let's say, total salary. Now, I want this total salary to capture the salary plus the added salary. You see? And here, we end up at salary. Let me say it's a number for this case, because we want to do what? So I'm not sure, probably the data type, if you remember, I can just use salary v% type. Now this, remember, a table does not exist. I'm just coming up with values here. So here it means that the total underscore salary should be equals to salary plus what? Plus added underscore salary. You see? Because we are looking for the total salary. So we have to capture the original salary plus what? The added salary. So blindly, we are supposed to get 7,000 plus 2,000 is what? 7,000 plus 2,000. 7,000 plus 2,000 equals to 9,000. But here we have an issue. You cannot add a number plus a character. You cannot add a number plus a character. So it means that we have to convert this character. You see the way it is written. This one is not a number. It is a character. So for you to add 2,000 to 7,000, you have to convert this character into number, and then you add 7,000. And finally, we get what? The total underscore salary. So how can we do this? So in this case, it means that if I go directly, let's say, for example, dbms underscore output dot put underscore line into bracket total underscore salary, then come and say end, press enter. You can see that I am it's just simple simple somewhere. Let me just repeat it. Now the error is somewhere there. Okay, I'm going to show you where the error is. So when adding, I forgot to put the full colon here. And then, now look at that. It is 9,000. It is 9,000. Now, what I've done is that, you see, we don't have a table called salary. We don't have a table called salary, but I'm actually taking into account that let this column, let's use the data type coming from that column as the base data type. So it means that when it comes to the total salary will convert. It will tend to forget or align all the data types. So the actual data type we're talking about is number, because here we have salary. Salary is a number data type. And then of course we have added underscore salary, which is a character. But because of salary percent type, it will convert this into number and then add 7,000 to 2,000, which automatically we get as 9,000. So that is just but the simplicity of performing like an implicit conversion, because actually the system that does the conversion for us in there. So just to know that whenever you are doing implicit data type conversion, the system will be there to determine that. But when you are using, you see, when you apply, I don't know if you remember, when you apply the to char, the to car, the to date, now it means that it is you as a programmer who is performing the explicit conversion. You are actually using these tools to convert it yourself, but the system will automatically convert it whenever it wants. So the way we've done this is that the system has done, or we've actually done something called the implicit conversion, because it's up to for the system to determine. But if we are to apply this, it means that we will be doing what? Explicit conversions. So we will still talk about that. Now let's talk about the last thing about the nested blocks. Nested blocks means that these are blocks inside another block. And how can I display that so that we can understand? Suppose I have, if I can just clear the screen. We have, for example, let me have in caps, and then we can have a variable here, then come to begin. So instead of having other information here, we can just again do what? We can just again declare, and then dash dash. You have like begin. Instead of that, again, you can just have what? You can have another one declare, and then that's variable. Okay, like begin. Let me just like end. So we know that we have end here. We should also have end here. We should again have end here. Now look at this. We have this one. This one is the inner block. Then we have, so this one is inside this one. And the two are inside what? Are inside there. So you can see that when you talk about nested block, this one is one block. nested block. We also have another one, the nested block. And then of course we have the outer one. So when it comes to nesting, these blocks, remember still under introductory, we are like under introduction, we are still doing some introduction. So Plsql blocks can be nested, and it means that the execution section can contain nested blocks. The execution sections can contain nested blocks, and that is the reason why you saw us having, once we start begin, we can have declare. So it's only the executable section. And then an exception section or an exception section can also contain nested blocks. So remember initially we talked about like 4 sections of a Plsql block or an anonymous block or a Plsql block in that matter. 2 are optional, 2 are mandatory. So we had the first one as declare, which was an optional section. We have begin, which was a mandatory section. We also have an exception section, which was also an optional. And then we end up with the end section, which was mandatory. So in this case, we are looking at those sections. Where can we actually have the nested blocks? Where can we have the nested blocks? So yes, it's not high time for us to use the nested blocks, but it's good for us to be aware. It's good for us to be aware that we will end up having nested blocks. So if you can actually go through the document, I think you will be introduced to a nested block and just see how it works. So, and remember, when it comes to these nested blocks, declaration of a variable, or when declaring a variable, how visibility or how visible is it? So we will talk about something called the variable scope and the visibility. The variable scope and the visibility. And for this case, if we can just do, let's say, for example, we want to know, let's say, for example, we want to know this kind of visibility. Let's say declare. I want to prove, here we need to have, let's say, for example, okay, let me have like father. Let's say father name. Of course, it is varchar 220. I want to give like a scenario, father name. And here we can just give, let me call it Obama. Obama is the father name. And yeah, let me say father age. Or let me just use, let me just use, then begin. I want to begin, just to have some simplicity. I want to begin so that we can see which one is. Now begin, we need to have a nested block. So here I will have like child underscore name, then varchar 220, full colon. This one, let's call it, okay, Mike. Mike is the child name. And then we have the begin. Now, when having the begin, we want to display here. So I'll just say dbms underscore output dot put underscore line into bracket. I want to get father name. So first of all, I'll just say father underscore name. Yes, and then I will end here. And then here, I will just use dbms again. This one, I want to have the child name. Okay. So let me just use the child name. Okay, child name. Let's enter. Let me end. Now look at this. Here we have a problem. We have an error here. Why? You see, when declaring this variable father name, without this, it means that we are supposed to capture father name outside this block. So it means that I should have changed child name here to father name so that I can get the father name as Obama. But the only problem is that I have tried to capture father name inside this nested block here. So this means that the feasibility to this is not okay. That means the variable declared outside is not going to be visible inside this nested block. So here we are talking about the variable scope. So where the father name has been declared as a variable is actually referred to as the global scope, or is actually referred to as a global variable. So global variables are always going to be captured, or the output of the global variable are going to be captured globally. The local variables, child now is a local variable. So if you want this to work, I can just repeat the same thing. I don't know what's happening here. Something has happened. Okay, let's see, SCR. Okay, let me just have it. Okay, I don't know what is happening here. Let's see. Okay. Okay, let me just have it as okay. So let me just declare, let's say father underscore name. It is virtual 220 full colon. Let's have Obama. Begin. Then I will just have declare child underscore name virtual 220 begin say dbms underscore output dot put underscore line into bracket child underscore name. I think I've already done some mistake there, but let me just query it. I forgot to put a name here for the child. Now let's prove. So before that, I'll just have, now it means that I am out of the local variable now. So I am now ending the global variable. So I'll just say dbms underscore output dot put underscore line into bracket father name. Now let's see what will happen. Ending. Now look, I am getting what? I am getting Obama. I'm getting Obama. Why? Because the global variable has to be declared globally. So here it means that we have a combination of this. So if I remove this part, then you can see that the execution part, the begin and the end, as the dbms underscore put underscore line. So this is how we do it. This is how we automatically do it. Now, if I bring it probably more, yeah, then it means that I should have, let's see, ed, let me just press ed for edit. Okay. If you type ed, it's going to open a notepad. And for this, I can adjust the size so that you can see. So here I can just put this name. Let me put Sammy. Now I think it's okay. So you can see the father name is Obama, the child is Sammy. Now let's see. So what happens is just save and close. Then put / and press enter. So you can see that we have Sammy and we have Obama. So this is what we mean. This is what we mean by variable scope. So just to know that when it comes to variable scope, we have to define which variable has been declared or which variable is declared as a global variable and which variable is declared as a local variable. So of course, the variable that is in the inner Plsql block or in the nested block is automatically termed as a local variable, whereas that is outside is actually referred to as a global variable. Yeah, so I think that is probably what we need to understand when it comes to the nested variables. And yeah, so I think in the next tutorial, in the next video, we're going to recover or just to do some brief explanation on that. And then we dive into another chapter. And that chapter is actually chapter 5. It's actually chapter 5, using SQL statements within Plsql block. So just help me this. Just go through chapter 4. Just go through chapter 4 with your own pace, and you'll get to understand more. So thank you, and see you on the next class.